Are you ready for the second to last story in this collection of my naughty little sister stories? I hope so. You could make a little pillow fort and maybe get some papers to do origami while you listen, or some little Legos you can build with, or it's always fun to do something creative when you listen to a story. That's my suggestion. On with the story. Hello, my talented artists. When My Father Minded My Naughty Little Sister by Dorothy Edwards, illustrated by Shirley Hughes. When my sister was a naughty little girl, she had a very cross friend. My little sister's cross friend was called Mr. Blakey, and he was a very grumbly old man. My little sister's friend, Mr. Blakey, was the shoe mender man, and he had a funny little shop with bits of leather all over the floor and boxes of nails and boot polish and shoelaces all over the place. Mr. Blakey had a picture in his shop, too. It was a very beautiful picture of a dog with boots on all 4 feet walking in the rain. My little sister loved that picture very much, but she loved Mr. Blakey better than that. Every time we went in Mr. Blakey's shop with our mother, my naughty little sister would start meddling with things, and Mr. Blakey would say, "Leave that be, you varmint," in a very loud, cross voice. And my little sister would stop meddling at once, just like an obedient child, because Mr. Blakey was her favorite man. And one day, when we went into his shop, do you know what she did? She went straight behind the counter and kissed him without being asked. Mr. Blakey was very surprised because he had a lot of nails in his mouth. But after that, he always gave her a peppermint humbug after he had shouted at her. Well, that's about Mr. Blakey, in case you wonder who he was later on. Now, this is the real story. One day, my mother had to go out shopping, so she asked my father if he would mind my naughty little sister for the day. My mother said she would take me shopping because I was a big girl, but my little sister was too draggy and moany to go to the big shops. My father said he would mind my little sister, but my little sister said, "I want to go. I want to go." You know how she said that by now, I think. "I want to go," like that, and she kicked and screamed. My mother said, "Oh dear, how tiresome you are," to my little sister, but my father said, "You'll jolly well do as you're told, old lady." Then my naughty little sister wouldn't eat her breakfast, but my mother went off shopping with me just the same, and when we had gone, my father looked very fierce, and he said, "What about that breakfast?" So my naughty little sister ate all her breakfast up, every bit, and she said, "More milk, please," and "More bread, please," so much that my father got tired getting it for her. Then, as it was a hot day, my father said, "I'll bring my work into the garden and give an eye to you at the same time." So my father took a chair and a table out into the garden, and my little sister went out into the garden too. And because my father was there, she played good child's games. She didn't tread on the baby seedlings or pick the flowers or steal the black currants or do anything at all wicked. She didn't want my father to look fierce again, and my father said she was a good, nice child. My little sister just sat on the lawn and played with Rosy Primrose, and she made a tea party with leaves and nasturtium seeds. And when she wanted something, she asked my father for it nicely, not going off and finding it for herself at all. She said, "Please, Father, would you get me Rosy Primrose's box?" And my father put down his pen and his writing paper and got out of his chair and went and got Rosie Primrose's box, which was on the top shelf of the toy cupboard, and had all Rosie Primrose's tatty old clothes in it. Then my father did writing again, and then my little sister said, "Please, can I have a drink of water?" She said it nicely. "Please?" she said. That was very good of her to ask. But father wasn't pleased at all. He said, "Bother," because he was being a busy man. And he stamped and stamped to the kitchen to get the water for my polite little sister. But my father didn't know about Rosie Primrose's water. You see, when my little sister had a drink, she always gave Rosie Primrose a drink too in a blue doll's cup. So when my father brought back the water, my little sister said, "Where is Rosie Primrose's water?" And my cross father said, "Bother Rosie Primrose," like that, cross and grumbly. And my father was crosser and grumblier when my little sister asked him to put Rosie Primrose's box back in the toy cupboard. He said, "That wretched doll again." And he took Rosie Primrose and shut her in the box too, and put it on the top of the bookcase to show how firm he was going to be. So then my little sister stopped being good. She started to yell and stamp and make such a noise that people going by looked over the hedge to see what the matter was. Wouldn't you have been ashamed if you were stamping and yelling with people looking at you? My naughty little sister wasn't ashamed. She didn't care about the people at all. She was a stubborn child. My father was a stubborn man too. He took his table and his chair and his writing things indoors and shut himself away in his study. "You'll jolly well stay there till you behave," he said to my naughty little sister. My naughty little sister cried and cried until my father looked out of the window and said, "Any more of that and off to bed you go." Then she was quiet because she didn't want to go to bed. She only peeped in once after that, but my father said, "Go away, do," and went on writing and writing, and he was so interested in his writing he forgot all about my little sister, and it wasn't until he began to get hungry that he remembered her at all. Then my father went out into the kitchen, and there was a lot of nice salad stuff in the kitchen that our mother had left for lunch. There was junket, too, and stewed pears and biscuits for my father's and my little sister's lunches. My father remembered my little sister then, and he went to call her for lunch because it was quite late. It was so late it was 4 o'clock, but my little sister wasn't in the garden. My father looked and looked. He looked among the marrows and behind the runner bean rows and under the hedge. He looked in the shed and down the cellar hole, but there was no little girl there. Then my father went indoors again and looked all over the house, and all the time he was calling and calling, but there was still no little girl at all. Then my father was worried. He didn't stop to change his slippers or eat his lunch. He went straight out of the gate and down the road to look for my little sister, but he couldn't see her at all. He asked people, "Have you seen a little girl with red hair?" And people said, "No." My father was just coming up the road again, looking so hot and so worried when my mother and I got off the bus. When my mother saw him, she said, "He's lost that child," because she knows my father and my sister rather well. When we got indoors, my mother said, "Why haven't you eaten your lunch?" And then my father told her all about the writing and my naughty sister. So my mother said, "Well, if she's anywhere, she's near food of some kind. Have you looked in the larder?" My father said he had, so my mother said, "Well, I don't know." Then I said something clever. I said, "I expect she is with old Mr. Blakey." So we went off to Mr. Blakey's shop, and there she was, fast asleep on a pile of leather bits. Mr. Blakey seemed quite cross with us for having lost her, and my naughty little sister was very cross when we took her away because she said she had had a lovely time with Mr. Blakey. Mr. Blakey had boiled her an egg in his tea kettle and given her some bread and cheese out of newspaper and let her cut it for herself with one of his nice leathery knives. Mother was cross because she had been looking forward to a nice cup of tea after the bus journey, and I was cross because my little sister had had such a fine time in Mr. Blakey's shop. The only happy one was my father. He said, "Thank goodness I can work again without having to concentrate on a disagreeable baby." However, that made my sister cry again, so he wasn't happy for long. I think there was more than one naughty person in this story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And don't forget to subscribe and give me a thumbs up.